You have no idea how much anxiety it gives me to film in public. Fucking subscribe. As some of you might know, I used to have a YouTube channel about science, back when I hadn't completely disappointed my parents. It put me in the position of having to come out to thousands of people. I desperately wanted to talk about it. I wanted to make videos about queer theory and my journey, but I was in denial. But then the 2020 quarantine happened and I was forced to confront myself. I had to truly and fully accept myself and accept my queerness as a part of my identity. This is awkward. And I also had to realign my brand, let's put it that way, which sounds very corporate, but it's kind of just the best way to describe what I had to do. I had to, again, come out to thousands of people, so I went from not flaunting it to being myself online, fully and truly, which, considering the messages that I get, to a lot of people counts as shoving it in people's face. So in today's video, I want to talk about flaunting that you're LGBT, aka finding that weird compromise between being authentic and not getting hate crimes that most queer people have to go through. First, as it's at this point tradition on this channel, let's get things straight.
In life, we hide the parts of ourselves we don't want the world to see. We lock them away. We tell them no. We banish them. But here, we don't. Welcome to Montero.
The example of Lil Nas X is perfect for this topic. Mostly because Lil Nas X had already come out as gay in 2019. Like, we already knew you were gay, man. Why did you have to give a say it on a lap dance? He used to do country music, so a lot of his fan base was pretty conservative. And in 2021, when he released Montero, a lot of people just stopped following him even if they got over the 2019 coming out, because they felt like Montero was too much. I have nothing against you being gay, but why do you have to shove it in my face? This is a very common trope. It's a thing that I hear conservatives say a lot. Probably like one of the most common forms of casual homophobia that is out there. And if you had a bit of a gut reaction at being called a homophobe just now, take a deep breath, we're all friends here, hear me out. When we say this whole, I have nothing against being gay, but why do you have to flaunt it? Or some less charitable version of this argument would go something like, there's a difference between being gay and being I'm not saying that word. What we're basically saying is, I'm okay with being gay as long as you're gay in the way that I tell you to be. In a way, we ask queer people to tone it down. You can be gay, but not too gay. There's only so much gay that you can be before it becomes too much and it's uncomfortable for me. And then my acceptance goes away. This is conditional tolerance. And if you want to be the one who makes the condition, well, it's not really acceptance, now is it? There's a good way to be gay and a bad way to be gay. And if you are gay in the bad way, then I'm not gonna respect you anymore. At the core of this way of thinking, there is still a deep discomfort with anything that is too queer. Some people may be tolerated, but queerness itself is not. The question is rooted in homophobia. So if you asked someone this question, even if you had good intentions and that someone got offended, well, now you know why. However, in the wise words of Natalie Wynn, real acceptance has to be built on real understanding. I can't just tell you, ooh, the question is offensive, you shouldn't ask it, because you still have that question inside you. And since you still have the curiosity, if a conservative comes along and tells you one explanation, even if it's a wrong explanation, you're gonna believe it. I also have to give a convincing answer. The only reason why Lil Nas X still has a career is because the LGBT community stepped up and decided to support him now 10 times more than before. He didn't do it for money and he didn't do it for fame. He had both of those things before, lap dancing onto Satan. A lot of LGBT people, when they come out, risk losing fame, money, the social media platforms, or their jobs. Why do queer people do it? Well, the answer is two things: authenticity and community. Let's get into it. I feel like the straight people who were gonna cause trouble are gone by now, so we can whip out the fancy sociology words. We live in a heteronormative and cisnormative society, which is just a fancy way of saying that in our society, being heterosexual and being cisgender, that's not transgender, are considered to be the norm, the default, if you want. If you know nothing about a person or a character, probably you're going to assume that they are heterosexual. And if you're thinking, well, the only reason why I assume that is because heterosexuality is the most common one, you're a bit missing the point in here. It is true that the straights have not been defeated yet, and heterosexuality is the most common sexual orientation. However, brown is the most common eye color, but yet people with blue eyes can marry each other. Parents don't reject their children because they have blue eyes, and so on and so forth. It's not about the trait, it's about how society treats that trait. And the trait of being heterosexual is treated in society as the normal orientation. Heteronormativity is the key to understanding all queer issues, so I really want to spend a couple of seconds to make sure you understand just like how deep it runs in society. Almost every aspect of society has this weird element of being cis and being straight is the normal thing. Sometimes it's like super small and innocent stuff. For example, my grandma, who loves me very much and who I love very much, when she wants to know if I'm dating anybody, she's gonna ask, do you have a boyfriend? Rather than a girlfriend or a partner. Or for example, in a movie, if there are two main characters, a man and a woman, a part of the plot, very usually, is that they're gonna end up together, without any need for them to declare their sexuality in any way. It's a sort of straight until proven guilty policy. For example, bigots often say that homosexuality is not normal or not natural. Transphobes will say, I'm not cisgender, I'm just normal, that kind of stuff. I'm using normal and deviant exactly for a reason, because like this idea that one sexual orientation is the normal one and every other is deviant inherently creates a hierarchy. And our society is permeated by the idea that heterosexuality is the normal sexuality. So, since we are not the normal ones, we have to come out. We have to specify that we are deviant in some way, with all the social and political consequences that that has. Most queer people choose to be visible for authenticity. You know, usually after quite a long time struggling with shame and denial, you decide that how you present yourself to the world needs to reflect who you feel you are inside. And therefore we decide to dress and speak and act in a way that feels authentic. It's mostly because constantly hiding yourself is exhausting. Like living in the closet is just straight up depressing and lonely. Hannah Gadsby has a segment in her show Nanette speaking exactly about this. It's gut-wrenching, and she talks about the pain of basically growing up in the closet. Because her family, like, they loved her very much, but they hated gay people. So it's again that conditional acceptance that I was talking about before. Anyway, the bit is good. You'll cry a lot. Go watch it. It's great. Most queer people have a period of repression in which we tone it down to avoid trouble. It's a constant policing of everything that you do, sometimes of your own thoughts, and it can really, really eat away at your confidence. It's very normal to get out of the closet, but then go back in, or to like maybe come out as one thing, but then struggle with another part of your identity. It's also very common to be out to just a group of people. So like there's a situation in which you feel like you can be yourself, but maybe another one in which you cannot. Maybe you're out with your family, but not at your workplace. You're out with your friends, but not your parents. That kind of situation. Lil Nas X took 2 years from the I am simply informing you that I am a homosexual of 2019 and the lap dance onto Satan of 2021. And after the song Montero, he wrote a letter to his past teenage self. I wrote a song with our name in it. It's about a guy I met last summer. I know we promised to never come out publicly. I know we promised to never be that type of gay person. I know we promised to die with the secret. But this will open doors for many other queer people to simply exist.
It's like the exact same way with when I put I might bottom on the low, but I top shit in Holiday, you know? It's kind of like, okay, let's normalize having these fucking lines in songs. I feel like that's really important for representation in general.
I think that this, oh, I'm gay, but I'm not one of those gays, is a very common thing in the LGBT community. You don't want people to see you as a political cause or as a freak or a caricature. You still have to figure out like exactly what this new label means to you and what this new identity means to you. So often you don't really allow yourself to explore your new identity for fear of being judged by everyone around you. I spent a couple of years in that limbo. And to be completely honest, it's terrible. And this is a weird limbo because like I was out technically. For example, I had like my little bisexual flag in the background of some of the videos, right? But I wasn't out, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't presenting myself in a way that felt authentic. And by the way, this is not just about being LGBT for me. Like there were a lot of ways in which I was not presenting in a way that was authentic, but being LGBT is the main one, probably the biggest one. I had this little bisexual flag in the background and I was kind of hoping that my audience would do the coming out for me. I remember that before the pandemic I got exactly one comment about my sexuality. Like one girl left a comment, something along the lines of like, oh, is that a bisexual flag? Is there a hope for women too? I remember feeling so seen. And yeah, I just realized that I want to feel like that all the time. I realized that I want to be one of those gays too, at least for now. At time of recording, I'm almost 26 and I'm still a sucker for a coming out story. Now you know why. This is much more likely a me problem than an LGBT problem. But another thing for me is that when I'm not authentic in front of thousands of people, I notice that comments, like especially negative comments, really get under my skin immediately. Because if I'm not defining who I am, then in a way, I feel like other people, even if they're just strangers on the internet, kind of have the right to define who I am. I know it makes no sense, but that's the best way I can describe it, which is a really privileged problem, I know, but like, you know, let me throw it in the mix. It's my video after all. So that is why we flaunt it. We want to be ourselves. It's a sort of almost revenge for the time we spent in the closet. And also, it's just fun. There's glitter involved. Sign me in. The other reason why people decide to be visible has much more to do with others rather than ourselves. Let's talk about community. By the way, when I said that every single non-binary person is insanely hot, baby, of course I was including myself. Look at me. Look at this outfit. We've been talking a lot about being visible, but what do I mean by that? Well, a bunch of things. Coming out, obviously, is a big one, or talking about LGBT issues. But it can also mean something in the way you style, like wearing one earring or a flamboyant shirt, dyeing your hair a weird color, getting an undercut, and not trimming it for 2 months because you don't have money. You know, dressing like a randomized sim. Proof in case. It's all those things that make it obvious that you are, you know. And why do people do this? Well, for bisexual and gay people, there's the obvious desire to find someone to date, like the love of your life. But mostly, at least for most of the people I've talked about, it's about feeling less alone. It's about feeling like you're not crazy, feeling less alone, and sometimes also like having a clearer picture of what your future might look like. So it's not just about finding people my age that I could potentially date, but it's also about finding people older that could show me what my life could look like in 20 years, for example. For me personally, TikTok, as silly as that sounds, was actually really useful. The TikTok algorithm immediately put me in LGBT TikTok, because of course it did. And that, like, seeing so many people being happy and just like vibing in their identity actually helped me just think of myself as a normal person. I'm still working through the shame. So, you know, it helps to see other people doing the work with me. Also, for me personally, the reverse is true. Like, if I talk about LGBT issues, I'm probably gonna be followed by LGBT people. And I want that because I like the idea of being surrounded by a community of people like me. Also, it makes making content much more safe, but I feel like that's a story for another time. But this means that queer people face a dilemma all the time. Because if I'm visible and recognizable, other queer people are gonna come to me and great, that's the community I want. But also, I become an easier target for harassment and homophobia. The co-writer for this video, my friend, he once told me that he really liked himself with pink hair, but when he dyes his hair pink, the street harassment and just like people yelling at him on the street, threatening him on literally as he walks down the store, it just becomes 10 times worse because he looks much more gay. So he usually avoids dyeing his hair pink. I mean, his solution was to dye his hair purple, so I'm not so sure what we're going for here. But his only note on this part of the video was, quote, LMAO. I actually have a similar experience from when I dyed my hair in 2019 for Pride. I dyed it rainbow. I got quite a lot of harassment online actually, like definitely more than before dyeing my hair rainbow. Although now that I think about it, maybe I kind of deserved it because I kind of looked like queer Krusty the Clown. Wow, she really was left on red by the conditioner. What the fuck was I thinking? But seriously speaking, I'm actually quite worried about talking too much about LGBT issues. The feeling that people don't listen to me and discard me just because of my identity is really painful. Like the fact that I'm bi or LGBT in any way or like look queer, for some people is an excuse to not listen to me or to take me less seriously, and that hurts a lot. I don't like having something so intimate and personal be politicized and misunderstood so much. Like, I'm sure it's really easy for everyone to understand why that's very painful. Also, if I become known as someone who talks about LGBT issues, like the queer one, I think a lot of people will treat me as a thing to debate rather than a person with which to engage. I love being visible. I love other LGBT people who come to me. I love having a queer audience. But I also hate being bullied. And I don't want my entire person reduced to a political cause. Of course I care a lot about this political cause, but I care a lot about other things. I don't want to be treated like a position in a debate, but I also don't want to hide myself. You know what I mean? This is all to say that what you might see as flaunting queerness is actually probably much more brave than you think. People in the LGBT community quite often get accused of playing the victim, quote unquote. But I actually think that being visible is the complete opposite of it. Like, I don't do it for attention. If anything, I do it in spite of the attention. I decide to be myself in public and to be visible and to be reachable for other queer people. I make myself a more visible target because I refuse to live in shame. How do I look? Do I look good? Yes, of course I look good. This look is fabulous. So we've seen some good reasons why LGBT plus people might choose to be visible. They want to be seen as who they are, they want to find community. Seems pretty reasonable to me. The problem that I now want to discuss is that the LGBT community is extremely varied. We have all lived completely different lives, but still there is some pressure on all visible LGBT people to represent the whole community. And because there's this pressure, there can also be a sense that if you fuck up, you screw over the entire community. I definitely hear this one. Like, sometimes I'm scared that if I sound too aggressive or too confrontational or like not rational, whatever that means, some bigot is going to use it as an excuse to discard all of that the LGBT community has to say. I also feel a big responsibility because, as most of you might know, I used to have a channel that was fairly popular and used to talk about science, quantum mechanics, computer science, that kind of stuff. And the thing is, like, science videos get recommended mostly to straight men. I don't know why, all the queer people I know are massive nerds, but whatever. And so I gained this big community and this big mass of people that follow me because of science content, and then I decided to be more visible and be more authentic. So for a lot of people that used to follow me on my science channel, I'm the first LGBT person that they see that they don't see as a crazy activist or a monster. It's hard to come out when so many people are watching. Like, that's just what's up. And look, like, rationally, of course, I know that I'm not that important that ultimately it doesn't matter, that if I fuck up once, I haven't doomed the entire community, etc., etc. I know rationally all of that, but I still feel this responsibility because to an extent it is true that a lot of bigots will use like one single sentence to discard the whole community. This is a problem that all minorities have to an extent, where like one black person is seen as the representative of all black people, even though every person in the end of the day can only speak for themselves. And this is a problem that not just famous people have. For example, if you're the only lesbian at your workplace, your colleagues might ask you questions about the LGBT community, saying like, hey, you're one of those people, you might know this, tell me your opinion about this thing. This is often done in good faith, and I would much rather take people who ask questions rather than people who assume the wrong things. So like, questions are good. I'm not calling out anybody for asking questions, but it can still put a lot of pressure on LGBT people who decided to be visible. I often get this thing of like, oh, why do you have to bring politics into it, right? Just stick to science, just stick to science communication, don't bring politics into it. But the thing you have to understand is that like, when you're LGBT, it's basically impossible to not be interested in politics because like people bring politics to you. So you kind of feel compelled to have an opinion on every little culture war, stupid LGBT thing that anybody said, and that can be exhausting because ultimately like being bisexual to me is about being attracted to hot people. Why am I spending my time caring what Joe Rogan said this week? This is a problem perpetrated by some straight people, but in my opinion mostly by the media. There's a lot of this tendency to take the opinion of one LGBT person, usually a very privileged one, like a celebrity, someone who's very rich and very famous, and just run with it and just like think that that's the opinion of everyone. Caitlyn Jenner. By the way, I know that journalists are overworked and underpaid, and they don't often have time to go into every detail of every question. I'm not blaming anyone, I'm just describing what's happening. Sometimes there's a problem of representation even with queer people that are not even people, like LGBT characters on movies or TV shows, stuff like that. Because if you write a character that is a lesbian, for example, there's this pressure of making her like a good representation of every lesbian on the planet. She has to be recognizable as a lesbian, but not be a stereotype. Her lesbian identity needs to be important to her because we need representation, but also her whole plot cannot revolve around the fact that she's a lesbian. She needs to be conventionally attractive because this is Hollywood, but also you can't just make lesbians please the male gaze and The solution to this one, by the way, is just to have multiple LGBT characters and not just like the token gay. Looking at you, every show from the 90s and early 2000s, if there's multiple LGBT people, like, you know, in the real world, then one is gonna be the little gay boy who's just figuring himself out and coming out in a huge and brave way. And another one is gonna be like the seasoned gay, like the ancient gay, whose plot is revolving around other things rather than being queer. Laura Crone made a lovely video about bisexual representation. Because like for bisexual people in particular, it's a bit tricky. Just watch the essay, it's good. This whole thing of representation, by the way, is why I'm always really careful to quote other creators, especially when they disagree with me. So if you want to get an idea of like what the community thinks, links in the description. Some other times I also feel like I'm not gay enough. I've been wanting to talk about queer issues for, honestly, for as long as I've been doing YouTube, like way before I quote-unquote became famous. But I always felt like I wasn't allowed to because I was in denial about my own identity. I was like, yeah, I'm bisexual, but like not really bisexual, you know? Turns out I am really bisexual, like women, women. Men, but women. And at the time I was dating a man, and so I was like, yeah, I guess technically I'm queer, but I'm not like really queer. But no, I am. Big ol' queerio. And like 99% of the time, the LGBT community is adorable and lovely, and I'm so glad I'm part of this. It's just such a lovely corner of the internet. I feel so blessed to be part of it. However, there have been times in which we have discoursed a little bit too close to the sun, let's put it that way. Since there is this issue that one famous LGBT person who is visible has a pressure to represent the whole community, sometimes the community itself can reject and ostracize a famous person because they feel like this person is not representing them well enough.
And now, this week's episode of The person who used to be a diehard One Direction fan when she was 14 has not got over her crush yet and will shoehorn Harry Styles into everything that she mentions. The title is a work in progress.
I don't like the way we talk about Harry Styles appropriating queer culture. I think that's a dumbass debate and it needs to stop. We have our own version of this with Måneskin in Italy and it's equally dumb. I would be happy if Harry Styles declared himself to be queer. I think it would help normalize the label. But is it any of my fucking business? No! And it's none of yours either. Damiano from Måneskin, Harry Styles, God knows how many other queer people who have not picked a label but still made it pretty fucking clear when and if they want to come out, we'll accept them. In the meanwhile, we leave them alone, which is exactly what we do with people who are still in the closet and figuring themselves out. There's very good reasons to be scared to come out, especially when you have to do it in front of millions of people. In the meanwhile, how about we focus on working to make coming out less dangerous and less shameful? And by the way, as a proof of the fact that the LGBT community cannot fucking agree on anything, my co-writer, the guy who helped me write this video, disagrees with me. And Harry Styles and here appropriation of queer culture is one of the things we fight the most about. There you have it. Sorry for getting heated, I just, as you can see from all of my looks, care about Måneskin a lot. Anyway, it seems like no matter what I do, I'm either flaunting it too much or not queer enough. To quote Natalie Wynn from ContraPoints, because I've never had an original thought in my life.
But the terrible thing about being a not normal with an audience is that you don't just get to be yourself, because whether you like it or not, people will see you as a representative of the community. Ugh.
This problem genuinely makes me uncomfortable, as I'm pretty sure it's obvious by now. As much as I would like to be so good that straight people will just give us rights, you know? As much as I would like to be like the perfect beacon of representation, it is very important that I remember that I can't do that. In the sense that I need to forgive myself, but also in the sense that I need to stay humble. I can't represent everyone, I never could, and I never will try to. I will talk about my life like every person does on social media, just without editing out the queer parts. I will speak on issues that are very dear to my heart, but I will not feel compelled to have an opinion on every little thing. I think that's toxic and terrible for my mental health. And most importantly, I will never stop questioning why I do what I do. I will, hold on a second. Here I am. I will aggressively try to make everybody read Judith Butler. I will fail because it's fucking boring and I'm a nerd. I want you to understand that my identity as LGBT is really important to me. It's not just like a little quirk that I have, is a part of who I am. But at the same time, I hope you can appreciate that there's lots of parts of me, you know? Like, I'm bisexual, I'm so proud of it. I'm non-binary and very much still understanding what that means for me. But I'm also a passionate science communicator who is still recovering from burnout, but, you know, one day will come back. I like mathematics and computer science and coding weird things and singing and dancing and acting and making dresses and making terrible video games that glitch all the fucking time and don't work. And most importantly, I'm a person who's really figuring themselves out. I have much more questions than answers, but in my search, I will be kind. So, do you want to come along?
Everyone is fucking walking by. I hate this. Please tell me that the audio for that was nice. Oh my god. I can... Thank you.
Gaga. Hindi naman kailangan ng gem. Donate na, basta yung...
Sorry, I'm almost over. No, go. Go ahead. Thank you. Is the microphone actually recording? We're almost done. I'm gonna do it. We can do it. Am I in frame? Am I on focus? I'm not. Who cares? I look hot. This is fine. By the way, I would like you to appreciate that under this I have my pajama because it's cold in here. Stronger than a